Hi everybody. For Algebra 2 today, we're going to take a look at factoring these polynomials that you guys factored last time with a different technique, right? So last time you guys still did the idea of putting polynomials into two binomials like this, right? Two groups of binomials in two sets of parentheses and then working with it from there. And you could have had the GCF there. It is possible, but basically today we're going to try something called factoring by grouping. And when you get started with this, the biggest key that I can give you is make sure that every time that you do factoring by grouping, you start the process by making sure that you're in standard form. And what does that mean? It means that you go from the highest degree all the way down to the lowest degree, or the constant, which would be the lowest degree. So the other item that you'd have to consider is nothing different than last time. You have to be equal to 0 for this to work as well. Now, there are 6 examples in your notes packet. I'm only going to do 4 of them, and then I'll show you the answers to the other 2 if we have time, or pause and let you guys give them a shot. It would be important for you guys to do that just to get the extra practice. Okay, so let's jump right into it. So what I mentioned about starting is making sure that you're in standard form, making sure that you're equal to 0. And the other thing is, the thing that you'll see me do, like it'll pop up with number 2, is your leading term. I would make that leading term positive. If you can do that, it will save yourself some trouble. So let's take a look here. So we know that this is the highest degree, so that has to come first. According to what I gave you guys in notes, we want that to be positive, which means if we're going to set it equal to 0, we should bring this over here. So I'm going to do that by adding 15. Now, once I do that, I can continue the process, and thankfully, it is in standard form now because it goes 3, 2, 1, 0 as far as exponents go. Now, the idea of grouping is really pretty quick. If you guys remember from split the middle, this is basically the portion of split the middle after you did this and you figured out what numbers to use. This is where split the middle is just the same as what we did before. Remember, after we did this X thing, or however your teacher did it, we would take these and put them in groups. And then we would GCF each group, and then we would GCF again. And that's no different than what we do with these polynomials. We just make sure that they're in standard form, set equal to 0, and then we can do this. So what you'll do is you'll GCF this first group right here, which the GCF would be x squared, and inside we'd have 2x plus 5. And then over here, our GCF would be, what, 3? So then we would have 2x plus 5 again. Now notice, you have a 2x plus 5 in common with a 2x plus 5. That basically is a GCF at this point. So we're going to bring that to the front. So we'll have 2x plus 5 as the GCF of that line, of this line right here. And then what's left over is x squared plus 3. So we can put that in parentheses as well. So this is basically what you got to last time. Once you have the sets of parentheses equal to 0, you use the zero product property and set each of them equal to 0. So we would have 2x plus 5 equal to 0. We would have x squared plus 3 equal to 0. We would just solve each of those. So if I do that, I would come up with, over here, x equals negative 5 halves. That's one thing. And then over here, I'm subtracting 3. This will be a little bit weird. Let's see if you guys remember this. I'm square rooting both sides, and one side's a negative, so that is an imaginary number. So x equals plus or minus. Don't forget that when you square root a quadratic, both sides, you get a positive negative answer. And in this case, this negative will pop out to be that I, and then we'll keep the square root of 3 in there. So we'll have plus or minus I root 3. So how many solutions is that? That's 2 imaginary and 1 real. And if we go back up here, this is the 3rd degree, so we should have 3. And then we'll just be seeing one of those on the x-axis for the real solutions. Okay, over here, a little bit different. That's why I wanted to show you this one. Remember up here in my notes I said We want it equal to 0, we want it in standard form, and we want that leading term in standard form to be positive. Well, in this one, if you can take a look and try to think ahead, the highest degree is x to the third, which highest degree is 3, excuse me. And that term is x to the third, but right now it's negative. So if I would bring it over to the right, I would accomplish two things. One, I would set this thing equal to 0, and two, I would now have it in standard form with the leading term positive. Now this problem is going to bring up something that happened before when we did split the middle and then the grouping after that. There's no issue when we group this here. The issue is when we group this guy, the second piece. So the moment that you leave that negative outside the parentheses, right, that's okay because we wanted negative 25x. But if you were to distribute that back here, you would get your negative 25x. But over here, if you leave this as a negative, that would distribute again to positive 200, where this is a negative 200. So the moment that we see a negative on this term right here, we have to keep the negative outside of the parentheses, and then we have to change this sign. We have to change that one right there. So that's a change. Otherwise, when you distribute that negative to this, you would not get your negative 200, which we saw up there. All right, so just remember that negative is going to force you to change that other sign that's left over, okay? When you group it, I should say. All right, now, that's really the tricky part of this problem. The rest is just like the first one I did. So we'll have 0 equals GCF, this x squared, and we would have minus 25x plus 8, and then we can see that we get this is the common term, right? So that's kind of the GCF of this line right here. And then what's left over is my x squared minus 25. So this is an interesting one. I could technically put x plus 8 equal to 0 and x squared minus 25 equal to 0. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want to continue to factor as much as possible. And that'll make my life easier, especially if that was like x to the fourth minus 16. This would be helpful. So we're going to do the difference of squares, and we would have this. Remember, difference of squares, you square root this first, you square root this second. Those are the terms you use. It only works if this is a perfect square and this is a perfect square and it's joined by subtraction. So now we could set each one of these equal to 0, and hopefully you guys are okay if I just kind of jump to it, that we would get this. That's what we would be looking at. Okay, now 3 and 4 I will give you an opportunity to do on your own. Hopefully I can fit 5 and 6 in the same video. All right, just a little bit trickier as far as moving things here. What's the highest degree? It's 3, right? And it is negative. So I'm going to move all this over here, okay? So I'm going to add my 12x cubed, and I'm going to add my 2x squared. So then I get 0 equals 12x cubed plus 2x squared minus 30x minus 5. Now you'll notice on this one, we get this negative situation again, right? And what did I tell you in the last one? Which is if you leave that negative, which is what we should do, we have to change that to a positive. Or change that sign, whatever it was. Change it to the opposite. Now we just jump right into GCFing. So we're going to have a 2x squared and then a 6x plus 1 minus 5 times 6x plus 1. And we're going to continue on here. I'm going a little faster to try to fit this in one video. This is our common piece here. So we have 6x plus 1, and we have this left over, 2x squared minus 5. And so at this point, we'll have 6x plus 1 equal to 0. And we'll have 2x squared minus 5 equal to 0. Solve them. So we get x equal negative 1/6. We add 5. We have 2x squared equals 5. Divide by 2. We have x squared equals 5 halves. This is still square rooting, so we get x equals a positive negative answer, but this time we don't have any i's. We just have an irrational number, because 5/2 isn't going to be something nice. All right, let's jump into this one. This one's just equal to y. Well, no big deal. It's already in standard form. We got to set it equal to 0. This is positive already, so let's just set it equal to 0. And then we'll just jump right into parentheses here. The reason I wanted to show you this one is it's got a weird situation with the GCF, okay? So here, the GCF, hopefully you guys are okay with this being 8x squared, which would become, excuse me, I'm jumping to the next piece in my mind. I need to go back. So it'll be 8x squared times x minus 8 plus. Now, remember we're doing grouping here, right? So in this section here and in this section here, what we really want is to see two things or two terms for the products so that we could GCF again. So with that being said, we need to basically say, well, what's the GCF of x minus 8? It's 1. And the reason we want to do that is so that we can see at this point, yes, this is in common, so it comes to the front, so to speak, and what's left over is 8x squared plus 1, so we can actually work this. Okay? Now, this is pretty straightforward. X minus 8 equals 0, add 8, and x equals 8. Now, your teacher may go to a different length here with this section right here, this 8x squared plus 1. I'm going to work it as far as I think is fair for this course. You can ask your teacher about it and see if they want you to maybe not do as much work or even go further. It's really kind of, each teacher might be different, but we should all be on the same page with what do we start to do and what should it look like. And then the answer could be a variety of looks, depending on how much you simplify. All right, so check with your teacher on what they want from you on that. I'm going to go to a place where I hope we all can agree, which is at least we have to do this, right? And at least we have to do this. And at least we have to do this. So there's a lot of at leasts here, right? Let me come up over here and keep finishing it out. So now we have x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 1/8. Well, guys, there's a couple things to point out here. First of all, we know we got to take it at least to this step, right? It's got to at least have that I. Now, here's what I would say. That might be as far as your teacher wants you to go, okay? Might be. I am going to show you how to go a little further, just for the sake of exposing you to it. But check with your teacher if that's as far as they want you to go. Now, how could I simplify this a little more? Well, let's look at it. So we could do this. The square root property says we could do the square root of each of those, right? Now, what I'm looking at is, I'm trying to just simplify numbers. The square root of 1 is 1, right? The square root of 8, we could break it down into 4 and 2, is 2 root 2. Now at this point, it looks a little weird to say I times 1 over 2 root 2. I is technically over 1, so we could just think of it as I is over 1 times 1 over 2 root 2, and we could put the I in the numerator, and we could have this. So we could have x equals plus or minus I over 2 root 2. Now, that's as far as I went in the notes key that's posted. You can go further if you'd like. You can rationalize the denominator, which would be, if you're curious on how, you could do this so that you would start getting this process. You would have plus or minus I root 2 over 2 times 2, which would be I root 2 over 4 positive negative. So that is as simplified as I can take it. Now, remember, this is not even in the notes key. I left it here because rationalizing the denominator is like a big discussion. Do you want to do it? Do you not want to do it? So on and so forth. That's about as far as you can take it right here. But we should all be on the same page that you can at least get here and check with your teacher if they want you to go any further, okay? Now, what I would do, guys, I'm running out of time. I would practice. Try 3 and 4 before you do extra slip and homework, and then check that with the notes key. Okay? Hope you guys have a good day. Take care.